Hi, Garth Foster Johnson here. I just wanted to show you real quick how you can get a 3D version of a motherboard inside of Unity. So I went to TurboSquid and I typed in free motherboard here in the search box, and they showed me a couple of things here. There's a cooler, there's a motherboard over here. This looks kind of interesting. So I clicked on this. I was able to download it for free. If you go over to my files location, you'll see that it's at the top of the list here. I chose the one that's the larger kilobyte size because I think it probably has more detail to it. So I just click on this. It basically asks you where you want to save it. I saved it to my desktop. I've already saved it, so I'll go to my desktop and I'll show you exactly where it is. So now it's over here. It's called Mainboard Medium Poly. It's a max file and it's in a zip. I extracted it and I ended up with this directory. Inside this directory, there's two PNG, there's a JPEG and a PNG, and then there's a max file. So this is a 3D Studio Max file. If you don't have 3D Studio Max on your computer, it doesn't really matter because we're going to go straight into Unity now. And I have an island that I use for testing of mobile vehicles. So my idea is if I was going to teach this to the kids, I would get them to navigate, walk around the island, and they would encounter different objects to study. So our objective is to get that motherboard. I'll put it on this. I built a little flat space on top of this mountain here. So very simply, I'll go to Game Objects. I'm sorry, Assets, and I'm going to go Import New Asset. Go out to the desktop. I'm already there. Inside of, let's go back to the desktop. Inside of, I think the folder was Mainboard Poly Max. I'm looking for Mainboard Poly Max. I want to find the Max file. I will import it. It takes a little bit of time to parse it and get the model into the actual Unity project. If you have 3D Studio Max, it is dynamic. So if you actually open it in 3D Studio Max, you can edit some of the components of the motherboard. And then when you come back into Unity, it will update automatically. So it is showing up a couple of, there it is. So now it's in my assets folder. The designer designed it on its side, so when we drag it in, Unity is smart enough to understand its correct positioning. I'm going to bring it up to about the height, just drag it in and kind of generally shift it over towards that hillside or the top of that plateau, which I think I'm right on top of. Let me scoot this over. Let's see. Getting close. So the idea is it's a little bit too large right now since it's so much bigger than the island. I will reduce it down to say, how about 20? Let's go down to about 50% in the width and the height and the depth. And that puts it still a little bit bigger than the plateau, but it's easier for the students to walk around, I would think. Let's take a look from the side here. So if I zoom in a little bit, just want to check and make sure that none of the plateau is peeking through. Looks like it's right on the surface of the plateau. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to bring it up just a little bit so there's no dirt on the motherboard itself. So now, take a little spin around, check it. There's already a rigid body first-person controller in here, and the controller is right above the motherboard. So when we start the game, it will drop down and we'll be able to walk on the motherboard. The motherboard needs it's going to need a mesh collider because the player will be able to walk on some of the components, but it will probably drop through the silicone surface. So if you go over here to the inspector, add component, I did a search for collider earlier. The collider I need this is kind of a complex model, so I'm going to add a mesh collider. It's intact, it's ready to go, and now we can test it. So if you go over to game, you can kind of see when I hit play, I should drop onto the motherboard. So I dropped right in between the RAM slots here. So that's not a good place to arrive. So let's pause that for a second and scoot the player over. So he's actually, we'll bring the player up and over. He doesn't end up in a space where he can't get out of. He's kind of trapped in that spot. So you might have to fidget with that. Go ahead and play it from this position. He drops down. And you can walk right, walk past that transistor, jump over that thing if he's tall enough. There is the CPU processor, or the CPU socket. Inside of here there's a nice little heat dissipator and a couple of barrel transistors. The RAM goes into this area here, and the color and all the parts and components that are mapped, we can add that at a different point. But the idea here is, if we make the character a little bit taller, say about twice as tall as the RAM sockets, then the character can look down on the top of the motherboard itself. So I think that's enough right now to get you going. Hopefully that helped you out.